It's good to be in Fairfield. My name is Jim Engel, and I'm director of the Iowa Downtown Resource Center. We are here doing what we call a downtown assessment. We do probably 6 to 9 of these in communities every year, and we kind of immerse ourselves in the community for a couple of days, do a lot of interviews, a lot of touring. We really learn about what your strengths and weaknesses are, challenges you have, and then we put our heads together and come up with a list of recommendations that we'll put forth in a written report also. They'll come back in 4 to 6 weeks. I want to also introduce Darlene Strachan, Dennis Reynolds, Keegan Hall, and Jeff Geertz, who are the rest of the 5-person team. I wanted to also mention, well, I'm getting behind already. I wanted to also mention just some ingredients to success that we always see. Any community has luck in their downtown area typically has these things. One is broad participation. Fairfield applied for the Main Street program a year ago, and my understanding they're going to reapply. And to do that program well, you need a broad participation. You need a good volunteer pool. So we'll be working on that. Never gets done without it. Second, city participation, just vitally important. And I'm talking about emotional, financial support, you name it. I just have not seen a community do a great job with implementation unless the city's an active stakeholder and on board. It increases tax base, things you do in the downtown. We did one of these visits in Knoxville a few years ago. And I remember many years ago, I made a trip to Knoxville, and I saw the buildings were all covered with aluminum. And I thought, ugh. And I went back 30 years later, and those same buildings were covered with the same aluminum. We did one of these visits, and now the city is putting incentive programs together. They've got an incentive to take off aluminum siding from the front of the historic buildings. So they really got things going in Knoxville. So that's one example of how the city can be supportive. The third element is you need a champion or champions to push this thing through. You need a lead group that establishes partnerships and priorities. First of all, want to start out with some community and downtown assets. We've got like 8 sections to this presentation, so we've got about 10 to 12 minutes each, so we're going to talk kind of fast. But these community and downtown assets were identified by you in our interviews, but also by us when we were on tours. And let me tell you, we broke these down into community strengths and assets, and then downtown strengths, assets. And I've never had 3 slides before. Sometimes I have 1. So this is a cool thing. Now I'm complimenting you so you're not mad at us later when when we talk about weeds growing in your sidewalks and stuff like that, okay? But just from a community-wide standpoint, the Arts and Convention Center, amazing. The Collective kind of serves as kind of a mini incubator in your community. Maharishi, holy cow! I'd never had like the tour out there, but it's a pretty amazing facility. We are in a meeting with artists, and I've never had that before. There must have been, I don't know if there are 15 people in the room that had like worldwide arts experience and all kinds of different arts. And you know, when I was asking them if they'd help with things, they were all raising their hands. So I think that's a huge advantage that not every community has. There are 200 nonprofits in town. I didn't know if that was a strength or a weakness, but I'm going to call it a strength, okay? The Highway 34 business corridor, the Loop Trail, the park system and lake, the hospital, the new daycare, am I saying that right? Maasdam Barns, just a really cool collection of things, a lot of different resources. And then downtown, the buildings and architecture. Now we're going to talk about that because when Keegan gets to his part, he's going to talk about some of those buildings looking pretty run down right now. But you've got the inventory, you've got the stock of really cool architecture. The courthouse is amazing. We didn't get in there, I wish we would have. We heard the word eclectic a lot. This isn't your typical Midwestern town that we work in usually. You got a lot of variety, ethnic diversity, restaurants, things like that. The First Friday Art Walk, sounds like a good event, and every time you do an event for a long time, yeah, you're going to have ups and downs with those events, but it's a solid event. We were in the Carnegie Museum yesterday, and I was totally blown away. I hope people from the community have been in there, have gone in there. It's different than what I expected. I thought it was going to be a Fairfield museum, and that wasn't the case. And if you go in there, you're going to be in there a long time because the person that works there will keep you. The kiosks are really. I always preach kiosks. Now they're difficult because they get outdated, but it sounds like Terry's got a plan for that. But I don't see those very often. It's one of the recommendations we make quite often that doesn't get done. So we're proud that you did those. The streetscape and plantings have been done some time ago. We're not here the best time of year to appreciate that, but very cool. Another event, Kiwanis Kids Day, we heard about. The park and gazebo, we were here at the right time because the gazebo was all lit up last night, and we were eating wings at the second floor of the Elks, looking at that, and it was amazing. So you should be proud of that. The Christmas decorations you're known for. You have a good stock of upper story housing. Not all of the upper stories are full, but it's kind of the sign of a hot downtown if you've got an active second story residential market. Downtown employees, you have a lot of office spaces in downtown, a lot of people milling around because they work here, which is really cool too. Always, a county seat town always has that advantage also. And as examples, the CoLab office spaces. We were talking to travel writers, was that 2 nights ago? Mm-hmm. And they were an interesting group. We were trying to get them to say something bad about Fairfield, and they wouldn't do it. Just come on. But somebody said, expect the unexpected in Fairfield, which I thought was a cool term. So we're going to move on. What we do on these visits is we put our heads together and we identify themes that we see as potential challenges. And I believe we came up with 7 of them. And we're going to kind of go back and forth on these themes, talk for 10 to 12 minutes each. As I said, we got to talk pretty fast. But in the written report, we're going to be much more wordy. So we're going to try to go through this fast and give you kind of a big picture look at these things. It's kind of whetting your appetite. And I believe we're starting right off with Dennis?
I've got this elsewhere in the slideshow, so look for this. But this was a diagram the first day as I tried to get my head around some of your strengths and weaknesses. So let's keep going, and we'll talk about this in detail later on.
There are the 7 themes that Jim mentioned, and we'll get to each of those individually here. And we're going to start out with streets and sidewalks, or as we were calling it, sexy streets and sidewalks. Really trying to attract people to the downtown, and also help them to want to linger, stroll, spend more time in the downtown. We have very little time with you today, unfortunately, so we're going to jump right in, and to prove right away we're not bashful. The downtown isn't as welcoming as it could be. And one of the things that makes it less welcoming than it should be, frankly, are the one-way streets around the square, in our opinion. There's just a handful of the signs. There are many of them around downtown that tell you one way, do not enter, don't turn here, don't go here, stop. Well, we think it should be two-way traffic, and we think it's very doable. Many people actually mentioned Pella as a town they really liked during the focus groups that we had. And I put a picture up here of aerial of Pella. Pella Square is a two-way street square, and it actually has narrower streets than you have. So if Pella's got room, we're confident there's room here, and we know there's room here because in the late 50s, it appears it still was a two-way street around the square, not that long ago. So what we're really proposing is taking it back to the way it was and the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, so this shows what you currently have with the storefronts on the left and Central Park on the right. You do have nice sidewalks, around 14, 15 feet. Angled parking, that's another 18 feet. Then you got 3 lanes of one-way traffic. And the previous slide that Jeff showed, you only have about 2,000 cars a day going through your downtown. That's very low. Most retailers like to have 8 to 10,000. So you've got very little traffic. In fact, I stood in the middle of the street frequently and took pictures, and I never had to dodge a car or make someone wait. So 3 lanes, you don't need 3 lanes. But it's consuming 36 feet of concrete right in your heart of your downtown. Your downtown wants to be welcoming. It wants to feel safe. It wants to make pedestrians have the priority. We want you to drive there, park your car, get out of your car, and then walk around and hang out and feel safe and comfortable, and really enjoy yourself. So we'll keep going. I think I got. So this is a potential alternative. It's the same dimensions, built storefronts on the left, Central Park on the right. So if you take out one of those current one-way lanes, and then if you convert the other one-way lane to go the other direction, so now you have two-way traffic, you have virtually the same amount of parking. In fact, I kind of played around in plan view. I think you maybe lose just 4 or 5 spaces, and we'll talk about that later. But what happens is you wind up this scenario with about 5 feet of extra space in front of your storefronts. So that allows people to have outdoor dining that's more comfortable and generous. Merchandisers could have merchandise displayed outside. We love seeing that. You have room for more benches, and you have very generous places for street trees to happen. Also, my 91-year-old mother, if she were to come here, instead of having to walk across anywhere from 40 to 72 feet of travel lanes to get to the park, she'd only have to travel 24 feet. And that's really important. And I'm not that fast either, so it's good for everybody. And when you think about it, what's one of your strongest assets that would bring someone to hang out and experience your downtown? It's Central Park. So why would you separate Central Park with all that concrete that's not necessary and all that one-way traffic that's actually increasing, making people want to go fast, not slow? So we think this could have a tremendous positive impact on the businesses, quality of life, the desire to come downtown and stay downtown, and your Central Park would get even more used. By the way, because I'm not sure I have this slide later, if you look on the right there in Central Park, there's kind of a funny looking thing. That's an outdoor fireplace. And you're probably going to talk about this later, but that may be even something. Think of other things that activate Central Park. We love it right now with the decorations, but are there other things that make it a 12-month event? And this is what that same slide would show in plan view. If it's Court on the right, Broadway on the top. I think it also provides extra green space for the perimeter of your park. And so almost all successful parks, a really strong model is to have shade trees around the perimeter and then open flexible lawn in the middle. And so this would allow you to really have more definition of the Central Park. People feel safer, even like my little 3-year-old grandson. I'd feel safer if I know there's a row of trees there. I know it's not a real barrier, but there's a perceived edge that says that's where the park stops. So, and you can see the small crosswalks and opportunities for flowering perennials to all really celebrate that crossing between the businesses and Central Park.
Continuing the streets and sidewalks discussion and this idea of returning to the two-way traffic flow. Potentially there's the way just to pilot this out, try it for 3 months, see how it works. The picture on the right is actually in Bloomfield. Bloomfield, unlike you, doesn't have the nodes or the bump outs at the intersection, or at least did not. So they just restriped the downtown, striped in the bump outs, and just tried it out for a few months. I think the same thing potentially could be done here through restriping, addition of some stop signs, and then working with the DOT to go flashing red on Burlington for a while. Just to give it a try and see what works, tweak it, and see how you want to do it long term. You have an example of the flashing red light or stoplight already up by the university on the highway, so maybe it could be done on Burlington too, temporarily at least, while you try out a different configuration. This idea of going to two-way traffic also helps with some of the pedestrian crossing concerns and safety concerns that we heard as well. Dennis just explained how that shortens up the distance for crossing at the intersections and crossing over to the park. This would increase access to the park at the corners as well. And it also, by going with two-way traffic and not having such a wide driving area, would slow down the traffic as well. That could help with pedestrian safety. And then we immediate thing that could be done, very low cost, would be to get the crosswalks along across Burlington redone so they're much more visible to parents and drivers and pedestrians as well, just to make that crossing a little bit safer.
Jeff, I might tag in on this. I talk about pedestrians are more like boats and cars are more like trains. So sometimes we try to engineer and force people to walk a certain place. And people will see a destination just like a boat and they'll take the shortest route. And we want that to happen. So for instance, the whole time I was here, I'd be at an intersection like Broadway and Main, and I'm not going to walk to mid-block if I want to go to the gazebo. I'm going to cut across the corner, and then I get over there and there's plants in my way and all sorts of disincentives for me to do that. And we think that would make a huge improvement to your downtown to make that connection as fluid and organic as possible.
Also under streets and sidewalks, we really want to point out the current disrepair, frankly, of some of the sidewalk areas around the square. It's really, I don't think, an indication of the pride that the community has in the city of Fairfield, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of pride based on the current condition of the sidewalks. We know that's not the case. Sometimes we don't notice these things if we walk on them every day and we live here, but from an outsider's perspective, we pick up on them very quickly. So there's a lot of work to be done on the sidewalks. It's going to have to require the city and the owners working together to make that happen. And even just painting curbs, fire hydrants, and pulling the weeds. The bump outs or the nodes actually look really great. I was here in August and they look beautiful. But there are a lot of weeds, and there continue to be a lot of weeds out there, and those are just some things that the building owners need to take some pride in. And thank you to the Beautification Commission for the work you're doing. But we need to stay ahead of that and put together, your best foot forward and your best appearance for your downtown or the front porch of your community. You've got some great examples here. You have some not such great examples. We've used some visual preference surveys lately in a couple of communities, and these are kind of the images that a lot of times, almost all the time, frankly, people tell us these are not the images they prefer, but this is what your downtown looks like. A lot of times people tell us they prefer this, or they prefer, I got another slide later, I guess, on that, but, just think about ways to enhance that pedestrian experience. What's going to make it feel more comfortable, welcoming, inviting, safe, and make you want to go down to the next door and see what's down at the next corner and what's on the next block and so forth. So we're not going to talk much about that today, but we can follow up with you later if you want. And then Dennis talked about this concept of a little corner fire gathering space on the square. Here's just a couple of examples we'll elaborate on later in the report. Again, creating that welcoming, comfortable, year-round gathering space that brings people to the downtown. Public art, you've got some of that, but we heard there's a lot of interest in incorporating more public art. This slide is just to show there are lots of different ways to incorporate public art and use the great, vast artist resources you have in this community, whether it's in your street banners, your bike racks, your railings, your crosswalks, murals, your utility boxes. There's just lots of different ways to incorporate public art in your downtown.
Jeff snuck in one of my art pieces in there. The lower
left
was defining parking lot for the Metro Waste Authority using recycled material. So there's lots of different ways you can use art.
Yep. I meant to highlight that. Thanks, Dennis. And then parking. We didn't hear a lot about parking here, but we heard some. So we just wanted to touch on it very briefly. You have ample parking. It's more of a parking management issue, which is usually the case in most communities. We encourage you to review your current parking ordinance, update that ordinance, and enforce the ordinance. One of the ways that would help the parking around the square, we believe, would be to improve those city lots and improve the connection of the city lots to the downtown so it's a more inviting place to park. Business owners, employees, you need to park in the city lots. It's pretty straightforward. We need to reserve those spaces for the customers, visitors around the square. Downtown residents. I know you've got a whole section in your ordinance, I think, that talks about downtown residential parking, but there are lots of different ways to address it. These can be explored further, whether it's permitting, whether it's directing them simply to the city lots, looking at the inside of the side of the square. We've seen some cool projects that have taken the back smaller portion of buildings on the first floor along the alleys and actually created indoor parking opportunities as well. But lots of ways to explore that, but we need to make sure we're leaving room for customers and visitors to park.
Those indoor parking spaces are a revenue opportunity as well, $50 to $100 a month, if not more. So this diagram shows courthouse at the top, Central Park. The blue are your current surface lots. Most of those are city lots. Some of them are like the bank or the church. But you've really got them well distributed around your perimeter. They're only 1 block away from your core. So as Jeff was saying, give them some love. Make me feel like you care about me and entice me to come there. Last time I was here in town, we talked, put a sign up there too, say free parking. If it's free, I'll go there. You know, if it says municipal parking, maybe not. I don't know if that's me or city employees. So free parking, shade trees, a little few perennials at the corner, maybe another kiosk at each of the corner of these lots to be sure you know where you're going. Well, we're on this. Nope, keep going.
Alleys, we're going to mention them, but we don't think it's a high priority at this point. We think you have other higher priorities. We do like the art that you've started incorporating into the alleys. We think you need to make sure you have a plan for how you're going to do that. And that we also need to make sure we maintain the alleys for delivery access, particularly if you move forward with going to the two-way traffic pattern around the square and eliminating that center lane that you have now. You're going to need to make sure you make that access for delivery vehicles through the alleys still available as well.
I'll jump in there too. I'm slowing you down, but if you flip what you currently have, if I came here and you were using your alleys as alleys are intended, which is service deliveries, and I said to you, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to move the service deliveries right in the middle of your main street, right where all your people are coming, and you know, and you'd go, what? Isn't that going to be less safe? Isn't that going to be unattractive? Isn't that going to be confusing? So now flip it and say, okay, get them out of there, get them where they belong in the alleys.
Yeah, it's partly why the alleys were there to begin with. And then one more thing. So we heard some comments about need for some improved audio system on the square. We think that's a great idea. It sounds like there actually are some sound and audio expertise within the community. You know, employ that expertise and apply it to the square. And I wouldn't stop at the park. I think it would be a great addition to add sound and music throughout the downtown. In communities in Iowa that have that, and there are several, DeWitt, Woodbine are a couple that come to mind. It really adds a festive atmosphere to the downtown year-round. If I was out there like I was today taking pictures, heard Christmas music, that probably would have put me in the mood to go in a shop and do a little Christmas shopping while I was out there. And then just Wi-Fi. We heard some desires for that. Keep that in mind as you look at doing some of these other infrastructure improvements that'll also help you improve some of your digital divide access issues, which I think we've come across in some of the reports we looked at before getting here.
Is it this way? Yeah. Okay. The next topic that came up again and again in conversations, and that was probably the second thing we noticed once we figured out which way to turn on different streets and found the chamber office, was the signage. So kind of what stood out to us is a lack of cohesion and a lack of kind of quality signage throughout the downtown. And we also noticed a lot of obsolete signage, businesses that have been gone for maybe even decades, but the sign's still up, and that can be confusing for residents and for visitors. And also a need to adjust sign ordinances. So that came up, and we'll get into that a little more. So some things to encourage and to look for with signage is that they're really creating a quality, cohesive visual experience when you come downtown, and that is good for, it adds to that atmosphere of downtown. If you think of the places you like to visit, places like Pella came up a lot. You know, you walk down there, the signage, it matches the branding of the community, like that visitor experience that you're trying to cultivate. And that's going to be different here than in a Pella or downtown Des Moines, right? You want that to match the vibe of Fairfield. And it's good for business. You know, when you're walking down the street, you can see here all these businesses, they have overhead blade projecting signs. That's great pedestrian visibility from a distance. Cars can also see that from a distance. As you get up closer, you're getting window graphics that are telling you additional information about that business. It's all on brand, so you're already getting a sense of what that business is before you're even getting to the business, and then you're invited further in as you get closer. And it also has a public benefit. When you go downtown and there's a bunch of hodgepodge signs and businesses that have been closed for 40 years, it kind of detracts from that experience that the visitor has, and it kind of confuses you. And on the converse side of that, when you have those nice, attractive signages, that really helps make it an inviting atmosphere. So some kind of small steps that you could start tomorrow is just going through and removing obsolete signage. You know, if there's a business that's been closed for 20 years, we could probably take that sign down. I know a lot of the buildings are still known by business names, but maybe it's time to get a new business in there and we can start rebranding that, or find another way to promote that. And then a simple way to do that, just kind of get a group together and say, we're going to go around and we're going to help some businesses clean up some of their signage. We're going to help take down some of that signage that needs to come down. And if you got a group of 10 people together for a weekend, I bet you could make a huge impact on the downtown. Then another thing to look at is individual businesses updating their signage and encouraging that among your business community, and really conveying that we want our signage to be cohesive and we want it to be on brand for your business and reflect kind of that vibe of Fairfield. And then kind of related to that, you do have a sign ordinance, but something that came up again and again is that it's not enforced and it's not particularly well written. So I think there's a great opportunity here to really revisit that ordinance and look at what kind of signage do we want to encourage, what do we want to discourage, and making sure that we're actually enforcing that, and that we're giving the kind of flexibility for businesses to be creative and to reflect their business identity, but also within those kind of broad themes that we want in our community. And then a great way to kind of implement that is to establish incentives that go along with that. So it's kind of the carrot and the stick, right? It can be expensive to put up a good quality sign, and that can be a big upfront investment for a business, especially as they're starting up. And so having local incentives to really encourage that is a great way to establish like that kind of quality, set that precedent, and to establish good design reviews so that we're making sure signs are getting looked at by multiple eyes. And it's also a great way to sort of incorporate some of that local talent we've been talking about. You have a lot of great artists in this community. And if you go to downtown Valley Junction, they are in the second phase of a process where they actually did a co-sign program where they got some grant funds together and they helped connect artists with businesses and sign makers to create really unique sculptural signs, because they'd identified that as the type of signage they really wanted to see in their community, something that was more three-dimensional and sculptural. And so by harnessing that, they were able to create some really cool signs. If you haven't been there recently, I would encourage doing so. And yeah, there's so much talent here in the arts and cultural community. I think there's a great opportunity for something like that to be really successful in Fairfield. And here's just an example of kind of a simple impact signage can make. So right now there's a banner kind of slung up above this storefront, and that's not really communicating the business, the vibe, what kind of food they have, whether they're open, that the quality of the food is apparently really good, but we want our signage to kind of match that. So all we've done here is take their already really cool logo that's very unique and just put it up where we can see it from a distance. Pedestrians can see it. We've added a blade sign so that as you're walking down the street, you say, oh, there's that Asian bistro place that I've really been wanting to try. And then kind of window graphics to kind of show some of those offerings that they have to just, again, kind of add to that signage texture. We could have deleted that. And
I thought we had a break.
yeah, everyone has a 2-second break.
The break is over. Theme 3, we talk about business preference or presence. Just a few items here we're going to touch on today. Again, things that are these are very simple implementation ideas here. Except for maybe the street lighting, but 3 out of these 4 can be done very quickly and easily. First thing is just to make sure that your posted store hours are correct. We heard that concern in a few of the focus groups that we met with, that places people think are going to be open are not open, or they think they're closed and they find out that they're open. And we heard this concern, was the one concern we did hear expressed by the travel writers, is the need to make sure that the posted hours are updated and correct, and also their hours that are listed on Google Maps are updated and correct as well. So a quick, easy step to do. It's something that seems like a chamber or a business group, maybe even a student entrepreneurial group could help all the local businesses just to make sure that information is current. We also wanted to talk about streetlights as part of the business presence. Originally, or I'm not sure if these are original, but at least at one time you had some very authentic and very appropriate street lighting along Burlington. You'll notice that the lights that are there are at a much more of a pedestrian, again, prioritizing the pedestrian over the automobile, adding to that ambiance and warm, inviting experience to a downtown. You'll notice these lights are probably 12, 13 foot tall. They kind of cut off at the top of the first floor of the buildings. And you've got similar lights in the park right now that also seem like they're appropriate to the character of the downtown and the history of the downtown. Then I'm not sure what happened across the street though. And these don't look like they're very old, but you've gone to a taller light fixture that's not really of a pedestrian scale. It doesn't honor the historic looking light fixtures that you have on the square, or I showed in that earlier picture along Burlington. And a couple other items here. Look, if you were a resident in the upper story and you've got some of those, and we're going to encourage more of those, that would be not a great experience for the upper story resident to have that light shining in all night long in that second story. We also noticed that even though with the tall lights that they're probably spread a little too far apart. So I'm not sure if the tall lights and the distance were a budget thing. I know that comes into play all the time, but I think a more pedestrian scale light like we showed in the park or that historic photo, and maybe a little bit closer than what you have now, would be more appropriate and would add for a better ambiance and experience when you come to downtown in the evening. I would also say that when you take that step to make sure that you think about how those lights can also support other events in the downtown. Have you provided the opportunity for power, for example? Is it the opportunity to incorporate that music around the square? The fixtures, the lights you have now do a great job of supporting your baskets, which are really lovely with the flowers, the banners, your Christmas decorations. They've got power to them. So you've got a lot of those things incorporated into these, but just don't forget that if you do change these out to something that's more of a pedestrian scale.
And, maybe you're going to talk about it here, right?
And then the other way to think about lighting the pedestrian experience in those walkways to create a safe environment, but also that ambiance, that warm, inviting, that romantic downtown that you may want to create. Think about how the store windows and the store displays lit at night and the buildings the lights on the buildings themselves could also contribute to that lighting in the downtown. Is that what you're going to say?
Well, yeah, and it's a little bit counterintuitive for downtowns the size of yours, any downtown for that matter. We want the window displays to be the brightest light. We want to showcase what you have to offer in your downtown. So we want to see merchandise. If it's a restaurant, we want to see people inside dining. You maybe have a slide of the Torinos watching them cook. I found that entertaining. They're watching them cooking pizza. We want that to be showcased first. So then to do that, you have highlight levels inside, but then outside, you really want them. You want a moderate light level. You don't want hot, bright lights, and you don't want high contrast, really bright and then dark shadows. We noticed from the Elks Club, the park felt kind of dark compared to the sidewalk. So you want to, think of it as a very strong moon glow that just gives a soft overall illumination with no scary shadows. That's what you're looking for. I hope I didn't steal your thunder.
Nope, actually, I put them up there while you were talking. So here's a couple examples. You actually have several great examples, and I told this to the team. We could go on assessments for 2 years and not come across a great backlit or lit up storefront window at night. Here I found several. The Mexican restaurant across from the Chamber, the new barbershop, the new old barbershop on the corner on the north side of the square. That was great. He was cutting hair. The window was actually open, so he's talking to me through the window screen while he's cutting the gentleman's hair there. But Torino's was another great example, and I think I have a picture of that later with them in the window making pizza. Really adds a vibrancy to the downtown. And as you see, there are other people down there. There are things going on. There's activity. It makes you want to go down and be part of it. Continuing on with the window discussion, here's kind of some do's and some don'ts. Similar to what Keegan talked about with getting a group together, and on a weekend you can make a major impact on old, outdated signage. Same thing with just cleaning windows. Let's get the windows clean. Let's get the clutter out of the windows. Let's not be using our storefront windows for storage. We know really the business owners should be doing this, but some of them may need help. Some of those property owners may need help. Town of Woodbine, we may reference them a couple times today. I believe still does this. They have a service day with the students, and one of the things they used to do is bring all the students downtown, and on a day they would just clean all of the storefront windows, just kind of that the old spit and shine. Companies coming, let's make it look great kind of our approach. If you got the blinds, the curtains, let's get those opened up as much as we can. I showed a couple examples here. The picture in the middle, you've got a really amazing jewelry store and art collection and about 3 or 4 storefront bays right on one of your main corners. But that second floor, the way the windows look right now, does not convey the quality or the interest that you have on that first floor. And it may detract people from wanting to go inside and see the great assets that are in there. So that's an example. Second one on the right, this community with its 200 nonprofits has all kinds of events and activities going on. And there are posters and flyers in many places. And in some places, they're covering almost entire storefront windows or storefront doors. I think we want to keep that to a minimum and think about other ways that we can display that information and other ways for people to find out about events that are going on. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but a couple other things. Try to avoid the tinted glass, because when you do that, it really creates a much greater visual experience and it's much easier to see those window displays. And I also wanted to touch back on, I mentioned Torino's, and I've got a great picture at night. But if you look at it at the daytime and they've got those the blinds down over the windows, I wasn't sure if they were even still open or in business during the day. But at 5 o'clock at night, when the blinds come up and the lights come on, that's a place I want to go into. Cross promote. So you have some vacant storefronts in the downtown. Those are opportunities perhaps to display items from other retailers in the downtown. Maybe it's an opportunity to bring in art displays from the local artists or from the schools. Maybe it's an opportunity to take many of those things still in the vault for the Carnegie Museum and move them to various storefronts as well and create a kind of a history walking tour or a scavenger hunt around the downtown using your vacant storefront windows. And given the artistic abilities in the community and some of the nice storefronts we did see here, leverage those talents. Have those folks help you do your window displays. It really can make a great impact on the downtown. Here's an example of a couple ways to display those various flyers, posters, and so forth. The one in the middle is from Marion, in their recent streetscape project in Uptown Marion. The one on the right is it's solar powered, it's lit at night, and it actually was an Eagle Scout project in Woodbine. So again, think about ways to incorporate local students, local artists, craftspeople into solutions that better your downtown experience. And what happened?
We froze.
We froze.
Another break.
Yeah, right.
I think I was done. I'm done now.
All right. Next topic we want to look at is your downtown building stock. So overall, you have some amazing historic buildings in the downtown, and that's really a huge asset. And there's some great opportunity to promote success stories about the great buildings you have and the great businesses you have. This cafe on the corner, Paradiso, is really great coffee, amazing looking building, outdoor seating. It's got a lot of things right, and so there's other examples of that in the community. So really promoting that we have these success stories is a big thing. And then some observations that we heard throughout meetings was just a general sense of the downtown being run down, underutilized, and there being some vacancy. So those are some things we want to look at addressing. Some assets, again, that you have, the great building stock, some of it's a bit run down, but that's still an amazing asset. If you look at some of the historic photos, which you guys have some amazing photos on the online archive through the county historical society, I believe. And, if you look at Paradiso back in the 1800s, you can see a lot of those same elements that are essentially unchanged today, and you'll see that with a lot of the buildings in your downtown. You don't have the missing teeth we talked about where a building gets vacant and it gets torn down, and then you have that gap that usually becomes an ugly pile of weeds with maybe a car parked in the middle, right? So you don't have that, so that's an amazing asset to your community that you don't have those. But you do kind of need a dentist. There's a lot of deferred maintenance and things like that that are kind of detracting from your downtown and your ability to attract new residents, new businesses, and just getting existing residents into the downtown. You also have an amazing mix already of upper floor housing and people working downtown already. You have a lot of office mix there, so those are great assets that just need to be improved upon. So looking at kind of that deferred maintenance, there's a couple examples here. Some of it's really just maintenance issues. You can see water damage on the corner of a building. That's going to cause, if that's not addressed, it causes long-term issues to the building that are a lot more expensive to repair than some routine maintenance. A gutter is a lot cheaper than hiring a mason for 3 weeks to rebuild the back corner of your building. You also have what I call canopies of death. So that's those metal projecting awnings. And communities have had issues with those kind of peeling off in heavy snowstorms, which is really a safety risk, and it also just isn't a very inviting presence to the businesses on your that side of the street. So that's something to look at, removing those awnings, and that creates opportunities to activate your storefronts more. Another example, the old theater building, it is full of businesses, but if you look at it, it doesn't really look inviting. It doesn't really indicate that there's a lot of business activity happening in there and draw you in. So there's opportunities there through some facade improvements to really activate that storefront and invite you in. That's going to be good for the business owner, the building, and the businesses that are in there. Some things to look at is with the maintenance, we're kind of seeing nationally that retail is going through transitions. It's making it harder and harder to make money in retail, and that's affecting our downtowns. People are having to adapt their business models. We're also seeing construction costs continuing to rise. So that creates a lot of pressure on some of those building owners and businesses, and that makes it really hard to do some of those maintenance things. That's usually the first thing that gets cut off of your budget is the little maintenance items. So really kind of revisiting what items we're needing to repair and creating a maintenance plan so that you're really prioritizing the things that are going to help add value to your building and help you attract better rent, better tenants that are going to enable you to fix the roof in 20 years, and that you're really planning for that. So when those issues happen, you're ready for that new roof, and you're ready to have the mason come out and spend 10 grand on the needed repointing. Is going to go a long way.
Sometimes it's a matter of protecting the building from being devalued.
Yep.
It gets away from you.
Exactly. And that, just a quick plug on that. Buildings are an asset that typically appreciate if we maintain them. Unlike, if I buy a pair of shoes, I don't expect them to last forever, but as your buildings have shown, they can last hundreds of years if they're maintained. So there's a huge asset there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value to making sure you maintain not only those businesses, but those buildings in your downtown. One of the things we like to do and demonstrate is look at what downtown buildings generate on a per acre basis when it comes to property tax. So I looked at the Acai building on the corner there. If you look at what they're paying on a property tax for their little 0.07 acre, and you take that to an acre size, they're at about between $24,000 and $25,000 per acre for property tax. And that puts it right on par with the high B, which is right around $25,000 per acre for property tax generation. Just so think about how that and its importance is to the community and to the city for revenue that then can be reinvested to further development in the downtown that then also will help support other initiatives within the community.
Awesome. And then kind of looking a little bit bigger, you also have some of those larger buildings that are either vacant or underutilized that present good opportunities for a more comprehensive building rehab to add new business storefronts and potentially upper floor housing and things like that in the downtown. That again, that's going to build a tax base. It's going to bring people downtown, business downtown, and that's something that is a sort of self-perpetuating cycle that's just going to help make the next project easier and easier. We've kind of identified a couple key projects through conversations, but I think an important next step is to really get a group together that's kind of assess the downtown a little more deeper and really kind of identify where are there opportunities for upper floor housing, where are there vacant buildings, and start getting the wheel moving on getting some projects going. Another kind of in that category, we know there's a lot of parking lots sort of on the periphery of the downtown, and there's also a need for housing. So there's opportunities there to maybe look at some infill housing that's a little more adjacent to downtown to build that density and that connection to downtown and alleviate the housing stress. And then kind of another point with some of these large projects, it's important to recognize that they're not going to happen overnight. So it's important to plan for success and to really start the ball rolling on that planning process, so you really identify the highest best use for that project and what resources you can pull in to make that project successful and sustainable in the long term. And then another kind of strategy is to just kind of start small and be incremental. So don't bite off the biggest chunk of the elephant to start, right? You want to start with things that are easy and achievable and kind of build where there already is momentum, where there's building owners that are cooperative and spaces that don't need as much of a lift. That way you can kind of build that momentum and experience, and projects will just become easier and easier as you kind of develop them. So one example is the old furniture building. It's in pretty good shape already, so it's sort of move-in ready. It doesn't need a lot of improvements to get a business in there. You also have this really amazing company that's headquartered in town that we heard rumblings of potentially opportunities for something like a kind of pop-up store in the downtown. So there could be opportunities like that to, with some more modest improvements, get a new business downtown that would have a big impact with not as much heavy lift as, say, a building like, a facade improvement on the radio building. That's going to be expensive, but it's already an occupied building. So kind of looking at the return there, that's going to have a huge visual impact, but it's not activating unused space necessarily. And then buildings like the J.C. Penney's came up in every single conversation. It is an amazing building. If you look at the historic photo, I mean, most of the detailing is still there, and there is tremendous opportunity with that project. That's going to be a heavy lift, so it's important to kind of start with those planning stages that the city and partners are already kind of working on to get that building to a position where it can be rehab, and look at what opportunities we can layer to make that happen. And something to look at, and this came up in a lot of meetings as well, is your building codes and ordinances. So really encouraging good development downtown. That is the goal of having codes and ordinances. And a big part of that is sort of identifying what we want to see in our downtown and making sure that spaces are being used for their highest best use. So that things like limiting storage, especially in the fronts of buildings. We want the front 30 feet of the building should be active business space that needs that foot traffic and is adding vibrancy in the downtown. Things like storage or businesses that don't really have public hours, we encourage those to either be on a second floor or maybe the back of a building. And there's ways to kind of partition off spaces to kind of accommodate multiple uses in buildings. And that's one way of kind of encouraging that occupancy. Also kind of looking at your housing standards and your zoning to ensure that we are encouraging housing in places that have capacity for it. So that might be looking at some communities allow housing in the rear of the ground floor as well as the upper floors, but you really want to make sure that commercial and residential separation is there and that we're not using the ground floor as just someone's residence. And then streamlining your derelict building process, I think is something that came up in a lot of meetings that would be really helpful, so that when you do have a problem building, that process is a shorter process to be able to facilitate getting that building into the hands of someone that has the capacity and desire to do something with it and complete that renovation project. And then another big thing is that needs to be enforced. So you can have all the codes and ordinances in the world, but if you don't have someone out there enforcing them, they're not going to be effective. And that's a city responsibility in terms of building code enforcement, but that can also be a neighbor giving a polite nudge to their neighbor saying, hey, that building's been vacant for a while, and I know Susie's looking for an art space, maybe we can connect them, right? So, and kind of another way to encourage good development downtown is having design guidelines. So that's kind of pairing with those ordinances to identify what does good design look like, what kind of elements do we want to see and enhance in our downtown. And we, through the Main Street program, have some design guidelines that are a great resource that can be copied and adopted in your community or altered to kind of meet your specific needs. And we'll share a link to that in the final report. So just kind of an overview of some of the things, talking about design elements and resources, things like that. There's a lot of information in here that is very valuable. And then, how can you use them? This can be used as kind of like a voluntary thing where it's providing as a resource, as a best practice. It can be tied to local incentives, or that can be an ordinance that it's mandatory to follow our design guidelines. And then, speaking of incentives and tying design guidelines to incentives, having local incentives to really encourage proper building rehab is hugely important. I don't know that we have seen any community that's successful without some form of local incentive and involvement from the city government that's really championing larger projects, securing funding, and has some local incentive programs. Those are especially important with some of those minor repairs where they're not going to be a competitive grant application for a federal or state program, but there's a need there for some assistance to help encourage some of those smaller projects. And there are resources like tax increment financing, which you're already using in the community, that could be established in the downtown to help create a funding pool for those. And then as projects get completed, that's going to build that pool of funds, so you'll have more money to kind of reinvest. And then there's also a lot of local capital here. So there's people that have resources in the community, so being able to tap into that, whether through donations or potentially like a local investment fund, to kind of bring some cash into these larger projects especially, is a successful approach. And then utilizing outside funding resources. So we'll talk a bit about that in a minute, but there's a lot of resources out there, but most of them require some partnership between a nonprofit and a city government that has typically some sort of financial skin in the game to help make those funding available. And then there's also historic tax credits is something you guys can look at. And right now you don't have a national historic district, so that's something I'd encourage, is looking at establishing a district in your downtown, and that would enable you to tap into that tax credit for some of these larger rehab projects. And we will, there's a lot of interest in us hosting a funding workshop, so we'll be talking more about that when we schedule that workshop, and I encourage everyone to attend that. And then here's just kind of a quick overview of some of the incentives and how that can be tied into a project. So we have things like REAP grants for energy improvement on commercial buildings. There's tax increment financing, and there's some funds for upper floor housing through new market tax credit, or what's the one I'm forgetting? Workforce housing tax credit. Yeah.
So this drawing, you kind of got a preview of it earlier. In the yellow, I identified what I would call buildings at risk. And they're typically vacant or underutilized. They're often large, so they're harder to kind of manage. They take more resources to sort of rehab and maintain. And so I think it's, as was pointed out, target those and focus which ones may cause a problem and devalue their neighboring buildings and the rest of downtown. And we think you've rightly identified the Penny's building and the building on the corner as one that really needs some focus. The kind of purpley lavender colors, I call those anchors, and that's just our perspective. You may have different thoughts about, those are good anchors. Those are positive wins in your downtown. So, for instance, you've got the green building supply, a win is right next to a building that's a high at-risk building. So make sure you don't lose momentum by going in the wrong direction. Let's keep going. Wait a minute. The Penny's building up there on the corner of Broadway and Court. I was testing some ideas. So you kind of see a L-shaped red bar, and then you see a light blue area behind it. And it was one idea that says, okay, you've got a lot of residential downtown. How do you provide parking for them? And we talked about the indoor parking. So this tests the idea that that red bar is about 20 to 30 feet deep of retail. So you activate the streetscape. It may only be two business or even one business, even though it's a big building. And then the light blue is parking. That's a big, tall floor plate. It's structurally probably very flexible. You knock a hole in the back with the garage door, and you dress it that way. You have a lot of square footage, so this allows you to sort of leverage that. And the upstairs could still be high-end residential. Let's go to the next slide. So this is up in the left is the historic picture, and then below it's what it is today. So this is how it could look in the future. For the J.C. Penney building, it could be a multi-purpose market. The historic storefront has been gone for quite a while, probably. It's not, doesn't look like it's there anymore. So in this case, I showed 3 operable glass garage doors. And so you could have a marketplace in there. Decorah has one. Washington has one. Multiple vendors. They all kind of have energy with each other. Maybe there's some food and beverage in there. And then on nice days, you open up those garage doors, and what's happening inside is impacting what's happening outside, and vice versa. The one on the left, the building, I don't know what you call that building. I think everybody lumps it into the Pennies, but it's really 2 buildings there. Again, really high ceilings, both on the first and second floor. It's a perfect opportunity for high-end upper floor residential. I have a feeling the ceilings are so tall you could probably have a loft type condominium up there, a main level as well as a partial second level, all in the second level of this building. And it's on a corner, so you have opportunities to have lots of light and extra windows, not just facing Court, but also facing Broadway. And then we heard a lot of impact. In fact, all these drawings are basically taking your ideas and our ideas and putting them on paper. And there was talk about, a playtime and kind of poking around. And one idea was this would be the quiet playtime. So if we have music venue maybe coming in the Armory, and we have live music elsewhere, and we have art galleries, maybe this is a place where just board games and play cards and maybe have some reading resources. It could also be an outreach location for some of your other great cultural assets. Again, the Carnegie Museum, some things that are happening at the university. Think of it as almost like a fun, learning, quiet. It's where my wife and I would probably hang out. But hopefully we hang out with 20-year-olds and 16-year-olds as well. So. And then this took the, native design building, Twin Eagles, and says, pull that metal siding off. We're pretty hopeful that there's still that brick facade behind it. It's probably going to need tuck pointing and some repairs. This is another one where the first floor has kind of been lost through time, but put back as much glass as possible. These are narrow, long buildings. They want light to get deep into those spaces. So these transom windows that go above the door level really help that. And then this business would really be helped by just bolder signage. Put 2 eagles out there. If it's called 2 eagles, put them out there. Not real ones.
That's me. All right. So it doesn't happen very often where someone calls us to do a downtown assessment where they don't have any issues. Sometimes communities define those issues by the vacant spaces they have in the downtown. This community is unusual. You have about 12 vacant spaces, but I would view those as opportunities too. We've had some other communities fill their downtown buildings up, and 95% of them are service businesses or professional offices. So you've got opportunities. That being said, it's kind of an unusual dynamic in Fairfield that I haven't quite figured out yet, because you have some elements here that you would think would help support retail in the downtown area. Upper story housing always helps support retail in a downtown, and restaurants supports retail in a downtown. You have both of those things. The other is just a local market for a retail category, men's clothing, shoes, whatever. So those are the three things. So this is what I can't figure out. 12 plus vacancies around this square, and it's noticed by locals in a big way. You know, it was brought up a lot. We heard a lot that retail is not strong in the downtown area. Few traditional retailers. We constantly got a comparison with Washington and Mount Pleasant. Why do those towns have retail and we don't? Something to think about when you go home tonight. You know, what those communities have that Fairfield doesn't have. Because I would guess they're probably not blessed with a bigger local market of retail shoppers, you know, given their trade areas. So why do they have the ability to draw more customers? Could be a combination of things. Can you look at available spaces in downtown Fairfield and say, wow, this would make a great business? That might be a problem. And perhaps those two communities I mentioned have done a better job lately of taking care of those buildings. They're both Main Street programs. They have incentives. The cities have put together things like that. So they may have that going for them. Street patterns, I don't know if that has anything to do with the lack of retail downtown, perhaps. You have kind of an odd business mix. I'm sorry, an eclectic business mix. That sounds better. You have kind of an eclectic business mix that might contribute to it. But then I hear it all the time. Communities complain about not enough businesses in their downtown, but yet that's usually the chore that's not delegated to some organization. So there's no one doing it. So those are all things to think about. But it is surprising to me, to this team, that you haven't had a lot of diverse businesses kind of similar to the restaurant scene open in downtown Fairfield. So I'm going to go to some recommendations here. I can do a 4-hour business recruitment workshop, which I'm not going to do today.
Would you come back?
I'm going to be here every week for a year, I think. Yeah, we're promising a lot here. But yeah, I probably would. Yeah, I probably would come back. So, 40 years ago, the cash cow for a property owner in a downtown was usually the commercial storefront space. And the upper space was usually harder to fill. It just wasn't the trend at the time. That is totally flipped. If you do a beautiful apartment upstairs, and you get 10 of them coming, I guess they're condo units, in that maybe the biggest, tallest building in the downtown, which is fantastic. So that is coming. But I guess the point I want to make is it's harder to fill the retail space now. Totally different. And this is the problem. In talking to people, and we probably weren't talking to the property owners, but some owners here appear to be satisfied with the lack of a tenant, which, especially those that can cash flow their building with apartments upstairs. So that does not contribute to a strong downtown. That's a problem. Now, we can talk all day about business recruitment and doing all these things, and I'm going to do that in a second. But there are stronger ways to deal with this too. We worked with the League of Cities on something called a vacant building registry. Now, this is tough. If the city would want to do this, hold their guns, and go this route, it's a good way to handle it. It's becoming fairly popular. We have communities that are doing it around the state now. Shenandoah is a small town that's implemented a vacant building registry. But what happens is owners have 30 days from the date of the building becoming vacant to file a form to be on a registry. The cost to register is free at the time. Then every 6 months, if it's still vacant, you've got a building inspection and a fee paid. So you just keep doing that. And sometimes that wakes up property owners to actually rent their space, or sometimes they even sell. But it's a way to handle it. I think it's working pretty good in some communities. The other thing, as I mentioned before, it's hard to see business-ready spots in downtown Fairfield. It's kind of hard for a prospective business owner to see the dream there. Work with owners. We were in Manila doing one of these visits, little bitty town. They had a bunch of vacancies, but it was worse there because it seemed like every vacancy had all of the junk piled up in front of the windows that was in the store for a number of years. I didn't see so much of that here, maybe a little bit. What we recommended there to get some volunteers, get the owners to agree to have them go in and do some work, clean up the spaces. Maybe a contractor would donate his or her time, or a group of them to have little work groups to do some painting, some cleaning, just getting some of those businesses, or excuse me, those buildings and storefronts looking more presentable. We've also seen communities hang kind of snappy signs in the window after they cleaned up the building saying, hey, this would be a great bakery, a business opportunity. Are there any realtors here? Oh, good. So I guess I'm on TV, so this is still a problem. Some of those realtor signs aren't very good. You know, it's negative. You got to have them. I love realtors. You got to have them. I'm trying to land on my feet here. But yeah, something like this that shows what this building could be. You know, maybe someone will drive by. Business recruitment. There's no magic wand here. You just have to do a lot of little things to get this going, and it's kind of competitive too. You know, we have vacancy here, but I don't think there's like an effort to fill the buildings. You know, you just hope that happens. But there are other communities that have business recruitment plans in place. So they've got like a chronological step to process leads and go after businesses for the downtown area. Okay. Clean up, repair, paint, make presentable, maybe even do mini grants, you know, to get those businesses cleaned up. Also, we like to have some kind of a market data in place to show prospective business owners they can make money. Now, I'm going to say it. You're reapplying for Main Street status. If you gain that Main Street status, we will lead you through a process for business recruitment, and we'll help you with a market analysis to show the feasibility of what kinds of businesses can work. If you apply for Main Street and do not get in again, I'm gonna come back to town, Dennis. There you go. I'm coming back to town and help you guys. We heard a lot about fine dining needed here. We heard sports bar. We heard hardware, traditional kind of businesses, youth-related kind of businesses. But acquiring some market data, and we'll help you with that. But also even doing things like focus groups, things like that, to talk to people in town, see what they would support. You know, it's not an exact science, but it gives you some idea. It helps you make a case on what kind of a business can work here, and that you can then sell to somebody. And these are some examples of market analysis. That's Uptown Marion. You can't see this very good, but it's a list of their vacant buildings. I do think you need to inventory the vacant spots. Do something like this where you can market the properties for prospective businesses. Other ways to promote new business traction. These are small things, but sometimes they work because you're trying to generate leads. During the holiday season, do some pop-up stores. Sometimes they make a lot of money and they stay. You know, and you've got some spots to put them. Rent incentives. You can work with property owners on, you know, a free rent for 2 months if they sign a lease this long. Oftentimes home-based businesses are ignored, and sometimes they're going so well that they're looking for a spot. So doing an inventory of home-based businesses and working with them. Think differently, start small. I mentioned the pop-ups during the holiday season, but it's also a good idea throughout the year. to develop leads. Sometimes even like farmers market vendors do so well that they're looking for an opportunity in a store, or at least to try a pop-up business. Shared space, co-op, you have some of this in town with offices and food-related things. But because of your vacant space, it is probably another opportunity for you to do something like that, something like the CoLab has. This is Decorah, correct, Jeff?
Yeah, it looks like it.
The landing.
Landing place in Decorah, and this is a mix of business that also shared space. But if you've been in the Nubo district, they have the Nubo Market. Is that what it's called?
By the Czech Village.
Yeah, and it's a pretty tight collection of businesses. Where in Decorah, there's a lot more gathering space, places to roam, places to talk to people. So this is not a bad idea too. Darlene sitting next to me. The other thing I want to talk about was business. Two businesses that can go together. You know, it's kind of a mini incubator, a way to start small too. Darlene runs a jewelry shop and scuba gear shop. Who would have thought? And I asked her, does anyone ever come and buy jewelry and then a snorkel or whatever? And she said, yeah, that's happened. So oftentimes that's a way to get smaller businesses together, and hopefully they grow and maybe can split off too. And then finally,
Well, you're changing a slide. Other than the Penny's building, which this would be a great opportunity, there's a heating and cooling business next to the martial arts on Broadway. That's a pretty big floor plate that could be a great candidate for this as well.
every time we do a downtown assessment, we hear that there needs to be more for youth. And Jeff, you were talking about this quite a bit, and we met with a lot of the students, and it seemed like they wanted a place to go. I'm going to give you a warning about that. I've seen those open and close because kids don't like to go where you want them to go. Okay? So I like the idea of something combined there with pizza or something like that. Get them involved in the decision making on what that is. I think that's the way to go. And even having it run by students is just a great entrepreneurial activity for students. But I think this could work in downtown Fairfield. I think,
Yep.
I went the wrong way.
Counterintuitive.
I went the wrong way. All right, Darlene, take us home.
I will. Okay. My first theme is events, and you have a lot of events. A lot of them are opportunities to socialize with each other, like Kiwanis Kids Day. I'm sure that's a gathering of both parents and kids. You have events that are recognition. You have a teacher's appreciation, a member's appreciation. I think there's a manufacturing appreciation. So those are all events where you're recognizing certain groups within the community. And then you also have entertainment. First Friday Art Walk, definitely entertainment. It's much more than I thought when I first heard it, that it was just going to be you go in a store, you get a glass of wine, and you look at some art. Well, I found out it's much, much more than that. That's just a piece of it. But that's right, I've got the clicker. Something that's missing is a shopping event. What kind of event do you have that showcases the goods and services that you offer in your downtown? We need to have an event that benefits the businesses, or you're going to end up with even more empty storefronts. So I'm thinking, maybe 2 to 3 times a year, you have something that the focus is on the businesses. We want to get people into those stores. People want to experience. They just don't buy stuff. We do. Yeah, we buy milk. We buy stuff that we have to have. But when it comes to other types of shopping, we want to have an experience. We sometimes want to do it yourself. Sometimes we want to have demonstrations. So I'm thinking, like maybe even once or twice a year, have an event, and this has got to be downtown/community wide. You've got a couple of stores that do work together, but let me go into the green building store and show me that waterproof flooring. Throw some water on it. Let me see what's happening there. I went to an event once where they brought in a beauty salon into a gift store, and I got tinsel put in my hair. It was fun. So many people did that. How about just trying to use a tool? I mean, there'd be times I think even I would I get some of my tools out and I don't know what I'm doing, and I know I'm doing it wrong. How about just even children and women modeling clothing within the store? You know, every half hour they change outfits. How about a facial? How do I make those pretty lattes? How do I make that little heart in my coffee? So things that would be different, things that would be kind of fun, things that would be an event and they would be an experience. What's also missing, a missing piece, is a spring event. It seems like around the holidays you have a lot of things going on. But in the spring, we really didn't tap into anything major or big. And we did hear from a number of people when we asked them, you know, like, when would you hold something? When do we need something? Spring was brought up. Okay. So something as simple as, you know, tag it as May Day or Spring into Fairfield. What we want to do is have an awareness of the products that are offered in the stores. We want to encourage people to shop. A lot of people had no clue what's inside some of the stores that you have right now. So what we need to do is educate. We need to share information. It's not that we're competing with each other, but if I don't have what you want to buy, I want my neighbor to have something so that we're going to be solid together. So a simple campaign, and this is just something I just kind of threw together, but going through the alphabet, showing, okay, I can buy an apron at home. I can get coffee at Cafe Paradiso. So all these things, really, you have to really think this through and really have a cross-reference of your stores. But I think a campaign such as this is going to tell people, oh, maybe I should go downtown. Oh, they do have stuff going on down there, or things that I could buy. Cross-marketing is also missing. We talked to a couple of the stores downtown, and they sometimes do shared stuff together. But what we think you need is something that is community-wide, downtown-wide, and something as simple as maybe a $5 coupon or $5 and chamber bucks, where, you know, if I eat at a restaurant, I could use my $5 at these retail shops or vice versa. But ways to encourage people to go into other places. It could be amongst the the businesses, or it could be within the restaurants, or again, we could do that together. What's missing also is a unique event, and we heard of one that's kind of in the works. I never heard of a fermentation festival, but that's being talked about in kind of the planning stages of happening right here in Fairfield. So I'm thinking, what would you do with a fermentation festival? Or how would I, as someone who doesn't sell fermented wine or beer, you know, what would I do? So it might be that within the store, you might have those little Dixie cups, and maybe you do give people samples of beer, wine, yogurt, bread. You could have a passport where people go in all these different stores, and we get checked off that I've been to these 10 stores, and then I'm going to win a prize. You know, it might be a basket of bread. It might be a bread knife. It might be a bottle of wine or a 6-pack of beer. We can interconnect that way. So even while something else is going on, we've got something that's growing. So we have one thing, and I don't know where even the fermentation festival would be, but it's expanding what's already being created. So rather than starting from scratch and doing something, let's, you know, maybe create some Fairfield wine stoppers, Fairfield koozies. Those things would all fit into something like a fermentation festival. And I think the title alone is going to intrigue people and say, hey, I think I want to check this out because I don't know what the heck it is. Really, really encourage focus on planning and programming. You know, maybe have some more small events. We don't always need to have something for everyone, but we want to make sure that those events are powerful, that they encourage people to attend. We can sometimes just focus on particular demographics. We want to also plan early. And this I've seen in a lot of communities. All of a sudden it's February, and on April 1st, we're going to have this big shopping thing experience going on. And those poor stores maybe don't have the merchandise. They don't, they need to start marketing to their customers early on. You need to start marketing. We might think we're doing a lot of marketing. We can never do enough. And don't just do just social media. I mean, I know newspaper and radio has changed. I grew up selling advertising in newspapers and on radio. I raised a family. Yeah, not everybody does that these days, but there's still a group out there. They look to that local newspaper. And yes, it's changed a little bit here, but make sure that there is a mixture. So if you're really planning something, it's reaching all of these different people, all walks of life, unless it's very, very specified. Theme 7 is communication, coordination. It's interesting that how many people we said, oh, we didn't know that. I didn't know that. And, you got staff going, I thought we've told everybody this 1,000 times. How could they not know that this is happening? But, that's life. It can be changed. You've got your chamber chatter, you've got Traction Thursdays, business after hours. So those are all methods of communication. But we've got a gap. Not everybody's going to go to those things. You've got mom and pop stores, one person shops. I know, like our store, we can't get away a lot to go to meetings or to even come to presentations like this. So how do we do that gap? So this is one idea. And there's a community that does this. I think they call it Cup of Sugar or something. But what it is a private Facebook group. And it's a platform for businesses, building owners, and then staff. And I mentioned the 3 areas of staff. We don't want the whole community being in on this. But it's a place where you can ask questions. Like, what's happening to that white 3-story building? Oh, I've got this display case. I'm going to get rid of it. Do you want to have it or sell it? I have to file a BOI report. First, I saw that one. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. But we have questions like that, and we can communicate with each other. And what a wonderful link for us to utilize. Now, you're going to get some venting. That's going to happen. Not always are these going to be happy things. But, that's a great way. Sometimes we just need to vent, and we feel better. Again, if you've got people venting in the same direction, hey, that's an awareness thing. That tells us we need to approach that subject. We need to be thinking about this. So we're finding out what people are needing and wanting. And this actually was brought up by the travel writers. And I think they called it 100 things to do in Fairfield for less than $10. I kind of switched it because to me that's kind of overwhelming. My idea is to do 52 things. How many weeks are there in a year? Yeah. Okay, so come up with some things from a cup of coffee, enjoy a glass of wine, so that every time you're featuring something that doesn't cost a lot, and sometimes these things are free, inviting people again. It's like, oh, I can try that. I can do that. And it's not going to cost an arm and a leg. Recognizing businesses. It might sound a little hokey, but having a business of the month, it's good for that business. I mean, hey, if I'm a business of the month, that makes me feel really good. I know that my peers and the people I live with appreciate my business. Now, I'm obviously not real creative, so that certificate is actually pretty ugly. But the whole idea is to recognize them, give them a certificate. You could frame it. You don't have to frame it. Present that to them, and it might be we do it at Attraction Thursday, where we've got a number of people, and I understand that gets live streamed and sent out so that you get more exposure for this business. You could do specific categories, like, there's different months, like Women's Small Business Month. I know I think there's a month for everything. So, you need to work out a plan for this, but this would, again, help educate the public on what you got. It would make the retailers, the business people, and it wouldn't have to just be retailers. It could be service industries, there's so many different things. And of course, you would want to have something on Facebook, have something on your website. Just do whatever you can to celebrate the business of the month. Volunteers and committee structure. Sounds kind of rigid or boring, maybe. But in our world, we rely on volunteers. And we also rely on a committee structure. And for some of you that are aware of the Main Street program, we have our 4 points so that people can sign up for specific committees. I personally am busy being retired. I don't want to sign up for a committee, but there are certain tasks I will do. I will serve beer in the evening. I will shred paper for the office. There's different little things that I can do. We need to think about people's specific talents, and going back to those artists that we talked about. They've got talent and they want to be involved. There's specific times of the year that people are available. And then there's specific ages. So I think we need to be very inclusive in this, and we need to reach out because we heard Fairfield has a vibrant volunteer energy. Are we using those volunteers? Are we using their energy? It's rewarding to be a volunteer, and you get things done for your community. So a push on this would be tremendous. At this point, we're time for questions and comments. So
Yes.
Brian, go to the mic, please. Will you go to the mic to ask your question?
Can you hear me now?
yes.
My name is Brad Frager. I'm the publisher of the Fairfield Journal. And first thing I wanted to say was I think this presentation was outstanding. I think a tremendous amount of wonderful ideas, a lot of dreams, and a lot of hopes, but I think it was an outstanding presentation. I know it'll be up on YouTube, but it'll also be in the Fairfield Journal. I wanted to mention something about the Fairfield Journal. I've been working on it for 2.5 years. It has the finest event meeting calendar in the southeast Iowa. And nobody knows about it. And it's by far the best event calendar there is, period. And I put out a weekly version on email, but of course it's available online, so you can access it anytime you want to. I'm blaming myself because I didn't attend any of your meetings. That when you listed the ways that you can communicate, I wasn't up there.
Oh.
Now I think it's my fault because I should have been part of this process. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to give you each one of my cards, and I want you to see what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years for free.
Yeah.
I haven't earned a penny, but I'm extremely proud of what I have, and I think it's a tremendous resource for the community, and I just need to figure out how to get it out to the community. That's where I'm having the problem, so the community knows. We're 1,000 times better than the Facebook, and I mean that, 1,000 times better than Facebook. If you want to know what's going on, and so I'm trying to make that happen. And subscriptions are free, and it's a great little publication. But anyhow, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
We can add that to the report, right? Slip that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we get 2 here. Huh?
Go ahead. No, you go.
My name is Rosie Witherspoon, and I have a store on the square. And I have upstairs people living. I mean, just like so excited about everything that you've said. Fabulous. I had one small question. The only thing that I couldn't see working is, or I want to know how it would work, when big trucks come down with a load of stuff, which happens for our business maybe 20 times a year, they can't, we ask them to go in the alley. Their truck is too big. It can't make the turn in the alley.
Oh.
So what happens when a huge truck comes with like
Yeah.
pallets of
Right.
food or housewares?
You know, probably the best example of that is the Country Club Plaza in Kansas City, if you've ever been there. And it's a wonderful, pedestrian-friendly, very successful. They don't have alleys, which is really remarkable. It was built right as cars were being developed, and so they schedule it. So they know that like at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, such a delivery will come, and so they try to schedule it at such a time that there's not
Okay,
a
that's an
prime.
idea. So
Yeah.
schedule it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I lived in Kansas City for 15 years, and I never even realized it till I was talking to some of the people that operate the plaza. And so it's just, sometimes it's amazing. You just ask your delivery people
Perfect.
a certain time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I actually have 100 things to talk about, but I'm going to try and just do it to 3. In the spring, we have Restaurant Week here in Fairfield, which is a big deal.
Oh.
It is a
I
big
bet.
deal.
I don't think we heard it.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
you
believe so.
seem to have
Yeah.
completely missed the tourism department here in town, which Terry Baker is heading, and she does so much for this community, and somehow you kind of like missed that one. Shocking, honestly, about that. The third thing I want to say is, as someone who built a business plan for a year and consulted with coaches in Des Moines and here locally to buy a downtown building and to have a business plan that has the upstairs for rental and the downstairs for mixed use and a hybrid business model that included online sales. When it came down to buying the building prices in downtown are so high that the bank, when they look at the price of the building plus the construction costs to fix the upstairs, which in one of the buildings that you mentioned is not ready for retail, the amount that it ends up being, the bank says we cannot assess this building for a mortgage because it's too high.
Yeah.
So we're caught in a situation where I'm ready to build downtown retail, but the math doesn't work. And even with grants, you can't get some of these grants until you own the building, and the bank won't let you buy the building because they don't think it can assess that high because of all the work that needs to be done. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 for those of us who really want to do something in downtown. So hopefully you have some creative solutions for those of us who really do want to work downtown. Those, I'll keep it to 3, but thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Jeff, did you want to address that at all, or in terms of layer cake approach? And
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it's very hard to develop these downtown buildings when they won't assess for all that you've put into them when the project is done, which obviously creates a problem with your banker and the appraisal values. So it does take many layers, oftentimes, of financing and funding and partners to make these projects happen. I think it would be a great opportunity to follow up with the workshop that Jim's talked about bringing here to get more in depth into the funding and how we've seen projects layer these different sources of funding together to make these projects happen. So I think we should probably just follow up with you directly. Maybe you can work that into that visit with the workshop,
Yeah.
depending on your timelines and so forth. I think that's all I have for now. One other thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was, right?
well, the other thing that maybe sometimes the city can be a help here in then lighting a fire underneath those building owners that says if you're not going to invest, if you're going to let it decline in value and decline our downtown, we're going to make it difficult for you. And there's some ways they can do that as well.
Yeah. And another thing I'll add to that is that's a common occurrence where the cost is higher than the assessed value. And one thing that makes that a challenge sometimes is that, especially when you're getting efforts started, you don't really have the market comps to look at to say, yeah, if this building is worth $1 million or it can be in 10 years, right? And so but being able to show that information is really valuable to kind of demonstrate like what are these buildings really worth, so you can go back to that building owner and say, look, the bank is saying this, here's what everyone else has shown with their buildings, like it's worth 20,000, not 100,000. So and that's something, it's very difficult, and a lot of people don't want to be backwards when they sell a building, so there's a lot of challenges there, but and we'll be sure to kind of include some of that in the report.
I remember what the other thing I was going to say now, because you talked about the struggle of you can't purchase the building without the money, but sometimes you can't get the money until you've purchased the building. One of the strategies to look at, and some programs will accept, is if you would just get a purchase option on the building. I'm on a nonprofit group that restored an old railroad depot, and we knew that there were at least 3 other developers who had approached that owner with the intent of tearing that building down. We wanted to purchase it, restore it. We were concerned we were going to lose it. So we were able to work out an opportunity with the owner to have a purchase option that gave us like 6 or 9 months, locked in our purchase price. And then that was something that was enough for us to go to some of these programs and be awarded funding.
Mm-hmm. There's also, just with the quick caveat, if you don't want to overpay for a building, but if that building, if to you it makes sense to make that investment and it's worth the purchase price, sometimes there's like creative financing options like seller financing, which can actually be a benefit to both parties because it spreads out when they're claiming their capital gains. So they get a tax benefit by spreading that out over multiple years. And that gives you some time to do improvements and get the building like cash flowing so that when you go to refinance with a bank, you can get more funds that way and you're not having to take out the same financing. So there's some creative ways like that. That takes a lot of negotiating with the buyer, but there's benefits to both parties that can be explored.
Roland.
Yeah, I had one question. In the beginning of when we started Tuesday, I think we defined the square as also the block outside the square. From your presentation, I get away with the downtown is only the square, just from what you showed.
Oh, I'm sorry if we.
No, I mean that's my impression. I might
now.
be the only one, but
yeah, I don't think we think of that as all. In fact, I would define it as even more than a block off. Yeah. I mean, they had quite a business stretching out 2-3 blocks. Yeah.
For instance, the drawing I showed included the Masonic Temple. Right. And so that's an important anchor. That's to me, it's part of downtown.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the part where it showed a little, but
yeah.
Because we talked about those.
Yeah.
Right.
The presumption was it was mostly the square. That really was the presumption.
Yeah.
You might want to take a look at the presentation.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's appreciated because obviously the one-way streets go beyond the square, and we're looking at two-way beyond just the square as well, but all of the.
In fact, the one-way streets take some of us way beyond the square.
Yes. Something I always do, and I didn't do with this drawing, for instance, is if you put a pin right on the gazebo and draw a 500-foot radius, that's 1,000 feet. And it's amazing how consistent 1,000 foot defines a viable district. And you can go the East Village in Des Moines, Valley Junction in Des Moines, Iowa City, and so people will walk 1,000 feet. Even the mall in Coralville, it's 1,000 feet from one end to the other anchor. So 1,000 feet is usually a really good, and it will pick up more than just the square. So yeah, we'll address that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was actually a slide I skipped over. But I showed a slide when we talked about parking and using the city parking lots. And I showed that it's like 369 feet from about the center of the city parking lot to the corner by the old JCPenney. And I showed how that's pretty close to Hy-Vee. If you park in one of the farther parking spots at the Hy-Vee store, it's about 310 feet. So we tried to give you some sense of that distance too. It was actually a slide I skipped over in the presentation.
Other questions? This report, written, will be available 4 to 6 weeks. I encourage you after you get that, meet as a group or groups and see what you like, see what you don't like, develop a priority plan. We always say that we're welcome and eager to come back if you want to talk about implementation with us or have any further questions. But we appreciate the hospitality here too. It was a great 3 days. Thank you very much.
I have one more question.
Yes, Berlin.
The funding for buildings, how are you going to make that workshop known?
We will schedule it. It'll probably be
Fairfield Journal, of course.
Yeah. Roland, I am absolutely committed to putting that workshop together.
So the workshop will happen. It will probably be co-sponsored by Grow Fairfield, the Chamber, and potentially Visit Fairfield if they want to get involved too, because we think it's important. I wanted you to remember this assessment was paid for equally by Visit Fairfield, Grow Fairfield, the Chamber, and the city. And when we get the report, we will look at it and try to find some of that low-hanging fruit that will be easy for us to do and make plans for some of the rest of it. If you have more input, feel free to send it to any of us. But thank you for coming, and we appreciate everybody that spent their time with the different meetings to make sure that they had all the information.
Thanks.